Hello, this is Tip Top Gaming here today with another Planecation breakdown. Now, this week we are visiting Zendikar with the Landfall event. So, first things first, obviously, what is the Landfall event? This is a completely brand new event to MTG Arena, and actually MTG as a whole, unlike Singleton, which we've seen before. So let's take a look at what this actually does. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, get a small effect based on the top card of your library. So you get this emblem, and it says, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of your library. If that card is a land card, put it into your hand. If that card is a creature card, put that card in the bottom of your library and create a 1/1 green plant creature token. If that card is a non-creature, non-land card, put that card on the bottom of your library, and each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So why don't we go over that just again? So basically, if you reveal the top card of your library and you exile it and it's a land, then you put the land into your hand. If it is a creature card, you put that card on the bottom of your library and create a 1/1 green plant token. And if it's a non-creature, non-land spell, then you put that on the bottom of your library and each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I think this is actually really interesting. It does promote more deck building ideas, but due to a recently printed card, which I'll be going over here in just a second, I think that this event is going to be dominated by one deck in particular. A lot of you probably already know what that is, but I think it adds a lot to it. You want to build a land-based deck. Now, before I get into the strategy for the event, why don't we just take a look at the art for the lands? Because obviously, if you don't like the art for the lands, you don't have as much of an incentive to actually play this event. Overall, I think these ones are okay. I like some of the previous ones, but I think the biggest thing here is obviously the full art land. But if you guys want to get a closer look at those, you guys can look at them in game. Now, there is one card that was recently printed, and I think it's going to dominate this deck. Or this event, and it is called Risen Reef. Who would have thunk? Whatever. So, it says, whenever Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it on the battlefield tapped. So, every time that happens, it would trigger a landfall thing. And if you don't put the card in the battlefield, you put it in your hand. Now, there are a couple things to note about the landfall event. It is not optional. You have to do it. So if you put a land on the battlefield and the top one is a land, you have to put it into your hand. You can't choose to leave it there. If the top card of your library is a creature, you have to put it on the bottom. You have to put non-creatures on the bottom. So just consider that when you're building around this. But honestly, I'm probably going to be using... it's been a while since I've used this. It's called Zombie Elementals. So what it does is it creates... it has 4 Risen Reefs. And then you duplicate that with things such as Mirror Image, Spark Double, so on and so forth. And then basically whenever Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield, so if you have 5 Risen Reefs on the field, and then you duplicate another Risen Reef, then you get to do this 6 times. If you mix that with something like Yarick, it'll happen 12 times, as well as the land ability. So, yeah. Oh, no, never mind. I lied. Because this, one thing to note is that the emblem is not a permanent. So Yarick here, who says, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Since the emblem is not a permanent, that does not happen. So yeah, this is the deck that I think is going to do really well, because it just dumps lots of lands onto the battlefield. A couple other interesting cards, There's this blue-green card from Dominaria that I think will do really well in this event. We can really just see anything that has the words land enter, and you'll notice a lot of these are land enters tapped. But you'll notice Tatiova, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So, mix that with something like Risen Reef and you can do really good things. Golos, who puts extra cards on the battlefield. Anything that really puts more lands on the battlefield, I think will do really well. Now, I'm sure you have lots of ideas. You heard this and you're like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to build. So why don't I talk about what will beat what everyone will be building? So if someone's building around Risen Reef, there are a couple key cards that you can use. For instance, one of them being Ixalan's Binding. This card can pretty much single-handedly just defeat decks. If your deck revolves around a certain card or cards, running Ixalan's Binding basically means you don't get to cast those. Sure, if there's already a Risen Reef on the field, you can duplicate those, but if you can somehow, like, clear the board because you're in white, you can easily do that, and then Ixalan's Binding, or vice versa, whatever order, obviously, then they can't cast those, and then they can't duplicate it. Another one is, it says entering the battlefield. There it is. Tuali Honor Guard. Creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. This is also a really big deterrent against this deck, because obviously when a Risen Reef enters the battlefield, it does something, and so that would disable that. And then another thing which really isn't like what really isn't like, because obviously this deck needs a couple win cons. I don't think you can really rely on just one win con. So you'll notice that I also run 2 Field of the Deads, which create a lot of zombies, and a good card to combat that is Blood Sun, which says it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and all lands lose abilities. And while that doesn't mean you're gonna instantly win the game, it is useful against a deck like this. Although they could probably still kill you with land entering the battlefield triggers. Because remember, if it's a non-creature, non-land, it does deal a damage to you. So I don't know if this is going to be the most useful card, but it is one that came to mind when I was like, oh, what would counter this deck? There are a couple other things like Deputy of Detention, which, if you guys want to take a look at that one basically just lets you exile target non-land permanent opponent controls and all things that share a name. There's, of course, things like Goblin Chain Whirler, which will just deal 1 damage to Goblin Chain Whirler, which will... That's probably not the best thing to type. That will deal 1 damage to basically everything your opponent controls and your opponent. So this will basically clear the board of Risen Reefs. Of course, you could actually run board wipes to keep the Risen Reefs down. There are a lot of different things you can run. Now, of course, you might also run a Nissa deck, running lots of land, entering the battlefield and turning your lands into monsters and then attacking. And, that could also be a really viable deck for this event. Overall, I'm actually really excited for this. Again, it's a new event, so we get to actually see what happens here and see how the gameplay works out. And, yeah, I think it's honestly it's going to be a good event. It starts Sunday, and it ends Tuesday night, so make sure that you get your wins in, because I think this is the last event, and, of course, you get the 1,000 XP for the Mastery Pass. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.